Runewars miniatures. This is a game that I saw at Gen Con 2016 last year. Well, quite some time passed since, I have to say. And when I saw it, wow, that was a stunner. The copy that they had there was professionally painted. They had nice terrain. Really, really an amazingly good-looking game. And also the mechanics and gameplay seemed interesting. It's a fantasy game that has to do with combat, with maneuvering units in the play area. It's not a board in the sense that it doesn't have partitions like hexagons or squares. It's a miniature game, so you use templates to regulate movement, and you maneuver your units around using special effects, spells, range attacks, brutal melee to try to destroy the opponent. So I like combat games, war games, I like fantasy, I like good looking games, so this game seemed to have them all. It took me a while before I could play, I had to wait for a little bit, but finally I did get my copy, I played the game, and in this video I'm gonna first show you the game and how the game works, and then I'm gonna share some opinions and ideas about gameplay with you in the conclusions of my video. The game is played using these rather impressive miniatures. They're unpainted, and at least for me they will remain so because I don't paint miniatures. But they look really, really nice and detailed. Minimum assembly required. Suffice to say that even I was able to assemble them with a little bit of glue, but I am not a big miniature guy, and if I was able to do it, then anybody can. So the miniatures are divided in trays. You can see some types of units have multiple miniatures on a single tray, and they can be combined in various informations of various size, like we can have this formation here, we can have this formation here, etc., etc. And then units are also represented by other game elements. One is a card that tells important stats about that figure. For example, we have a card for the rune golem, a card for the spearman, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, we have a command tool, which is this unusual tool here, which you use to give order to your units. At the beginning of each turn, the players will secretly issue orders to their units simply by moving these dials secretly, and you will move one such dial. Well, you program one such dial for each unit that you have, or you don't put them actually next to them, you keep them in front of you, possibly by the card. And then, as you can see, these orders also have numbers, and the orders are resolved in ascending number from lowest to highest. So somebody says number 1, anybody has an order number 1, number 2, number 3. Oh, yep. My spearmen have a number 3 order, so now I'm gonna resolve that order, and that's how you do it. When it comes to that phase, to the phase that has the number of your units, you reveal the order and you execute it. And this is pretty much the core idea of the game. Now, figuring out what the orders do, it's a different story, of course. These two blue orders here with that arrow, these are charge orders. All that they do is they allow your unit to move in a straight line forward by that number of inches, or by that length. I would say by using a template with that number on. So if I'm using a 3 charge, then I'm looking for this template here. Actually, to clarify, this is, to be more accurate, this is not called a charger, this is simply called a movement forward. We'll talk about that later. So to move a unit, you place the corresponding template, the template corresponding to the movement next to it, and then you move it to the other side of the template. As simple as that. Then say I have programmed my Mr. Golem here to move by whatever, and I do the same movement. That's how movement works. Now, if you give them one of these marching forward orders and the unit during movement collides with an enemy unit, then that is super scary, and the unit receives a panic token which you will place in your play area by the card by the card of the corresponding unit. I mentioned, maneuvering, marching forward as opposed to different from a charge, because there are other orders that do allow you to make contact with an opponent without taking panic. And this second dial here is a modifier. Basically, each time that you program your actions, you'll program an action here and a modifier here. The modifier to be used needs to be of the same color as the action. So these actions here will modify my movement forwards. This other action here will modify these other actions. So this one will modify melee, and so on and so forth. So this is to move forward, and I get panic if I hit an enemy unit. Unless I'm charging, in which case I will receive a panic token if at the end of movement I do not make contact with an enemy unit. Oh, life. So this is just to go forward. This is all you can do. But you can combine it. We can combine the movement with one of these other symbols that then allow you to turn. And in this case, you're using a curve template, which may be a 2 or a 1, etc., etc. Because basically you're applying that modifier to the distance that you were traveling otherwise. So for example, if this is my combination for movement, I am moving forward, my modifier says that I'm not moving forward in a straight line, but I'm moving forward in a curve fashion, and now I am a -2, so simply will have a movement of 1, and I take again the corresponding template. And this is how it works. So these modifiers may modify the direction and may modify what happens when you make contact. So you can charge and make contact with an opponent moving straight or changing direction. Again, moving in a curved fashion. This gives you defense if your attack. This gives extra hits to the opponent when used in melee. And this one allows you to activate special abilities that may be described on your card and may have a similar icon. Back to this other side, again, moving forward. Then you have shifting that allows you to move laterally or backwards and not just forwards. Reorganizing allows you to pivot, to change the orientation of your unit. This symbol here is called rally, and it's funny because depending on the orientation, sometimes it looks to me like it's almost like the Eye of Sauron, and sometimes it looks like Thor's helmet, but apparently this is a trumpet, no, a horn. It's a horn that you use to rally your soldiers. There are several game effects that will give you tokens that have negative effects, blight, stuns, all sorts of bad stuff, and this action here allows you to remove them. If you use an action and do not have the negative tokens, then you use you get the inspiration token, which is beneficial because then later you can use it to prevent a negative effect from being used against that unit. And then we have combat, melee, combat. Then you're simply, if you're engaged with an enemy unit and you use that action, then you're attacking that unit. Also, of course, you get to attack if you have played the charge action and you make contact. Then at the end of the movement, you do get to attack the opponent. Combat works in a very simple way. The card of your unit will tell the number and type of dice that you will roll. As you can see, for example, maybe 2 red and blue. There are the units that use white dice. There are in fact 3 types of dice with different symbols and different abilities. If you play games by Fantasy Flight recently, that means in the last like 15 years, you're familiar with these symbols. Hits, well, you count as many as you get, and they will do damage to the opponent. Surges, you use to activate effects that may be described on your card. Stun tokens, no, panic tokens, these are panic tokens. Again, you give them to the opponent. Accuracy tokens that allow you to target enemies, so various things. But pretty much when you want to do a lot of damage, you want a lot of hits. Oh, actually there's a special symbol on this die here, which is just like a sniper attack. You hit and you do damage, and that's it. Because the hits you're collecting, but it's not all that, it may not be all that easy to go past the armor of the opponent. Here, bam, nice fights between the zombies and the paladins. When you're attacking, you count the number of hits that have been generated. Then you multiply that by the threat level of your attacking unit. That usually is based on the number of traits that are attacking, their abilities that may increase that. Sometimes, for example, individual characters may have special threats. Oh, you see these tokens here? Yeah, because the battlefield is full of mystical, magical and energies that fluctuate. So at the beginning of each turn, you flip this, you throw these tokens like coins, and the icons that represent the energies that are available to trigger special effects. But we were talking about the hits. You collect all your hits, you multiply them by the threat level. So suppose at the end I have 8. All right. Then you compare the total number of hits with the defense value of the target. For example, the defense value is this number here written in the shield, and then you have the number of, we could say, hit points or life points, which is the number of actual damages, wounds that it takes to remove a unit of that type. So the number in the shield is the number of hits that it takes to inflict a wound, and then those wounds are applied to the number of life points. So for example, if somebody inflicts 5 hits against this guy, 4 of them are converted into a wound, and you put a wound token here to record that, and the other one is not enough to produce another wound, and so it's lost. This is very laborious. It sounds very laborious. Take the hits, multiply them by the threat, divide the total hits by the defense, apply wounds. It seems very laborious, but in truth, multiplying by the threat is not all that complicated, and there are many units that have defense of 1 and 1 life point. That means that a single hit produces a single wound and removes a single figure. So that complex system doesn't always come into play. It really only matters when you have bigger units that have a defense that is not of 1. These are the basic ideas. You can play a scenario in which you're just trying to slaughter each other. A standard scenario lasts 8 turns, and you will use a little dial to record that. And if you completely exterminate the opponent before then, all the better for you. You win the game. Otherwise, you play until the end of the 8th turn, and at that point you count points based on how many survivors you have on the board. I guess it's a different way of calculating how much damage was given to each side. So the side that has the most survivors at the end wins the game. And of course, there are also other scenarios with different objectives, but this would be the standard idea, the standard scenario. Organize, program your moves, execute them in turn order, move, maneuver, fight, trigger special effect, and hope that you will do more damage to the opponent than the opponent will do to you, or that you'll be the player that is first to complete the objectives of the scenario. I like this game. I think it's very solid. It comes together very well. I may have to play it more to really determine if I like it, because I like it. I already said that. But I don't find it as groundbreaking as I thought it was before trying it. And that means, well, that the game is good. There are a lot of games that are good while still resembling other games. There's no problem in that if you don't have those other games. If you have a game that is good and groundbreaking, then, well, I'm going to recommend it to anybody and everybody because there's not going to be any redundancy in your collection. But this game covers a lot of ground that has been covered in other games too, and does that very well. So my only warning is, well, be advised if you have some of those other games, which I'll mention later, you will see overlapping areas here, and therefore you have to decide whether or not you want to add a game that has similarities in common with other games that you own. And clearly the big elephant in the room, or the big giant worm with the evil guy on top, like you have in the game, the big golem in the room, is that dial that is used to plot movement and other actions. And well, even before we had the dial, we had the templates and the cards that we were using in Wings of War and Wings of Glory, World War I and World War II. Then, of course, we had the dial and the templates in X-Wing, in D&D Attack Wing. So it's not that it's a new thing. It's a new thing. Again, it's okay. All the games that I mentioned already resemble one another, are similar to one another. Seals of Glory, again, another game in the family. They all are very similar, and I like them all. But again, if you had to choose, if your budget is like I can get them all, then you have to choose. And this is a game that definitely is reminiscent of those ideas. The double dial, I'm not entirely sold. I can't get past the feeling that there is a gimmicky aspect to it that makes gameplay a little clunkier than it needs to be without maybe truly considerable advantages. Because do I need two dials to indicate that my unit is turning? Yes, I need a dial to say it's a straight movement and another to modify it so that the unit turns. But I have other games like X-Wing and the Attack Wing that have a single icon where the unit is turning already. So why do I have to do those things? The only reason to me to justify that is if indeed the modifiers can be combined in a gazillion ways with the different actions. Then yes, then I have a number of combinations which would not be easily described or included in a single dial. Then having two exponentially increases the number of things that I can do. But alas, then because of the coding of the colors, certain actions can only go with certain modifiers and vice versa. In truth, I just got the sense that probably all that you can do with those two dials could have been included in a single dial, or with other ways of combining modifiers and main actions. It makes the game feel a little clunky. Yes, it adds tactical possibilities, but I don't know, it seems to me like the potential has not been fully used here. I think that there's more that could be done with that idea than you can do here. I shouldn't have to use two dials to say I have a straight movement, but then I modify so I can turn. Other things like combining an attack with an extra effect, for example, extra hits or extra surges, that kind of thing, that is good. So in that sense, again, this is something that we have seen before. Dice with all of those icons, so surges, etc. We've seen them in many games, and again, there is nothing wrong with this. But ultimately, this is a fantasy miniature war game that has similarities with other games that you already own. And don't get me wrong, I'm not even saying this to criticize it, simply to describe it, because I keep saying it's not necessarily a negative. Because then, although this game has many cousins and relatives, it has its own identity, and what it does very well. Because the miniatures are really beautiful, yours will be even more beautiful than mine, because I am not gonna paint them. Yours are gonna be astounding. Gameplay with the two dials is not all that different from plotting movement in D&D Attack Wing or X-Wing, but it works. It's nice, and you do have that little extra element with some combinations that you wouldn't be able to have on a single dial. Combat is interesting, movement of the units, the interaction of the units, the abilities of the units, the undead can come back, so you have to really inflict a lot of pain to devastate them, to inflict considerable damage before they bring everybody back. The golem is big and scary and has a thick skin, but then when you get past that skin, doesn't have many life points, so there are specific ways in which you need to address that character. The two leaders of the two sides have other abilities, the cavalry has its own things, so definitely nice combination, nice synergy of actions. Everything very typical in fantasy games, again, nothing that is earth-shattering, but it's well done. It's fun to see how to maximize the abilities of some units and try to protect them, taking into account the weakness that they have when compared with other units, when they have to deal with other units. So it's not that light of a game. It's a medium weight. I mean, when it comes to fantasy war themed games, I'm not talking about traditional classic war games like in the GMT tradition. In that case, within those parameters, this is a very light game. But within the Fantasy Flight tradition, the very trashy combat games, then it's sort of like medium, which still makes it approachable even by non-hardcore gamer, but at the same time it means that it has layers of things that you can do and a space of decision that allows you to do a lot of fun stuff. Now, after I mentioned all the things that make the game similar, the similarities with other games, I have to say, however, there also are things that give it its own personality. One thing is that, yes, we have a lot of games where you're plotting movement and giving orders to your units, but they tend to be about the sea, like Sails of Glory, or the skies, like the attack wing, X-wing, and what you call it, and Wings of Glory, Wings of War. Not so much about land units. The exception is the attack wing that also has land units, but then you have an interaction between land units and flying units, and the flying units still are the ones that take the headlines. Here, at least for this set, it's strongly based on land warfare. Probably there will be expansions later and you can start flying over the head of some of these units, but I like this gives it a personality that is different from that of other games where you're plotting and using those dials. It's nice, it's down to earth, it's about paladins and undead clashing, charging each other, maneuvering, etc, etc. The movement feels a little more slow than in those other games, but it fits the theme, and maneuvering these units around the play area definitely is fun, even though it may take a little longer to get where you need to go. When the units clash, well, there's going to be an attritional element, there's going to be brutal pounding of the two armies against one another, which is a different flavor for, say, those are the games where you're flying and you hit as you pass, and then you're going around and maneuvering, and then there's going to be another hit. Here, when two armies clash, well, there's going to be a use of effect and special abilities, but it's just going to be a bloodbath, and the clashing of armies may just be, when two armies clash, that may just be the end of the maneuver for that game until one of the two is obliterated. So I think that the game captures well the different context, different setting, which is land warfare, and does that in a way that feels different, gives the game a different pace and a different flow from those other games with dials and plotted program movement. Other thing is the use of the tokens. It's a simple idea, but I really like the fact that there are a lot of effects that give tokens to the opponent, but then you spend them, that you get to manipulate the tokens of the opponent. You decide when to use those negative tokens that the opponent is settled with, and you get to trigger them. The morale test also based on the number of panic tokens that the units have. When you are attacking a unit and the unit of the opponent needs to take the panic test, you draw a number of cards from a deck of negative effects, and then you get to choose which one you want to assign. So it's fun to decide which effect there is. The range of effect changes. Again, it's not a new idea that you draw a card and there's a negative effect. We have that in X-Wing. But it's fun that it's the opponent that gets to look at them and choose what to give you. So that's fun. And again, to choosing the timing, other cases of not just when to give the negative effect, but when to actually trigger it. It's not a big thing, but it's fun, and I think it adds just another wrinkle to the design and makes it interesting. Overall, Runewars miniatures game is a solid war game. Or war-themed fantasy game, but it's one that I like. It's good. It really has its own personality. It's a solid design from the point of view of the designing of the components, the designing of the units, meaning what they can do, gameplay, combat, effects, etc. All of these things come together well. in a game of tactical combat that has an element of maneuver and really has a brutal element, an attritional element that really fits the theme. So it's a solid fantasy war game or war theme game. Because of all of the similarities with other games that have come out, I'm not gonna give it like a completely unconditional endorsement, because there's some of you that may say, well, it is a big game, it is an expensive game, and maybe what it can give me that I don't have from other games is not that much, is not worth that huge expense for maybe not a huge difference in gameplay. So because of that, take that into account, look into the game, also look for more information about that game, think about the other games that you have in your collection that may have similarities, and decide for yourself. But if you do not have many of those other games, or if you're fabulously wealthy, then please go ahead and do add this game to your collection, because per se, it is a really, really good game.